right, folks, look at this. Hey, Magnus, welcome aboard. As my voice decides to leave as soon as I start the stream. Sorry about that. Let me take a swig of lukewarm tea for the working man. Hey, RPG Grandma. So I thought it might be, I don't know, fun, interesting and I've seen questions pop up recently about it on Facebook. I think it was Facebook. Anyway, about making a one shot. And I know with PAX coming up, it seemed something, I don't know how many folks are making to PAX Unplugged. If you are going to be at PAX Unplugged, I shall be at PAX Unplugged. Find me. Find me. If it's like the A-team situation, you might need to go into I was going to say phone booth, but do phone booths exist anymore? I don't think so. Anyway, you could find me. I'd love to say hi and chat. Gosh, what is going on with me? Okay. So I'm trying out a different kind of mind. So this is not Ouija. This is called something else. What's it called? Board mix? Trying it out. It's a little something differently. I'm not trying to replace Ouija. I like a lot of what Ouija does, but I find sometimes for the mind I don't love the mind mapping aspect of Ouija as much as I like some of the other stuff. So just wanted to give something else a try. So I'm trying out this board mix. So if you wonder why the whiteboard doesn't look exactly the same, that's why. Hey, Ian. I started, I hopefully will build this out as we go, but I tried to get ahead of things a little bit and lay out some of the talking points or some things I think to consider, right? We want to create a one shot and we think about, well, why do we want to create a one shot? What is the goal of the one shot? It might just be, I called it experience, right? It might just be for fun. Oh, I want to try. I just want to do something for fun. And the benefits, I guess maybe first we say, what are the benefits of a one shot? Obviously, there's some situations you're at a con, you're not going to be able to play a campaign game at a con. You're going to get something. So you just go and play this singular experience. You might want to do it in your home game because maybe you're the GM and you just need a break from your main game and you think you could throw in a one shot, try some things out, things a little different without kind of breaking too much of the flow. Maybe you're not the GM of your home game and they need a break. So you can take over for a week, throw something out there. Maybe you want to try out a new system. Maybe you want to try out a character class or anything new or different. A one shot's a great way. Maybe you want to try out some new players. I was actually going to make a video about this because I saw, as often happens, there's there's always that sort of evergreen conversations about folks like, murder hobos, right? It's a topic that's never going to go away. It's always there'll be a big thing about murder hobos and it'll die down. Then there'll be another big thing is, I guess somebody else has a bad experience or just comes across for the first time, maybe some of these aspects of behavior. And one of the things I was thinking about just making a video on it was, hey, use a one shot. If you don't know about your players, I tend to think of murder hobos as being kind of new to role-playing games and generally younger, both younger folk and new. And I think there's a tendency, especially when you're younger, especially when role-playing games are new, to just push boundaries because they're not, you may used to be playing things like video games that oftentimes don't give you that kind of leeway to just do whatever you want, or a situation, whatever kind of game that just lets you just go out there. There's no walls, there's no protective barriers between you and everybody else. And then some folks, I think they just, especially the first time they're playing, and again, especially because when they're younger, just want to go, oh, really? Like I can go like stabby this store clerk when he gives me attitude, and oh, the bartender, you don't like it, well, I'm going to bonk you over the head, right? All that stuff I think happens. So what you could do is and I imagine, though maybe I've been lucky, I really haven't had that I can remember really much like murder hobo tendency players I've played with or that I've ran. Maybe I've just been lucky. And maybe it's also because I just don't remember, because at that time I was young and I was part of the murder hoboing crew as much as anybody else. But if you have players and you're not sure what they're on about, you're not sure how they're going to be, you think maybe this might be an issue with them, either because of stuff they've said or just because they're younger and again, they're new, use a one shot. Say, hey, you guys, come on over. You guys are interested in playing. I reached out to you. You reached out to me. We met each other at a local gaming shop, whatever. We're going to have this game. Let's just do a one shot. And that one shot basically will allow you to sort of fine tune some things because you can work on your campaign you're coming up with what your campaign is going to be about, a one-shot's a great way to kind of fine-tune that aspect. Also, the system, if everyone's new to the system, it's a great way to fine-tune. Hey, maybe I don't have a lot of experience with whatever system we want to play. This is going to be a chance to try it without committing to a whole campaign. I can just do this one shot, and if I love it, then maybe we can keep going. And if I don't love it, we can start over. And then, as nothing also points out in the comments, you can try out those new players. Find out, hey, do we jive as well playing as it seems like we do when maybe we're talking about the game or during whatever recruitment type things we're doing, where it seems like, oh yeah, we're going to be a good fit. But are we really? Well, let's have this one shot and we can see. And it's kind of no big, right? And it's no big investment because it's a one shot. You may be using pre-gens or really quickly generated characters. So there's very little, I think, you're trying to do is a little overhead in terms of not necessarily your preparation. Well, I mean, yes, your preparation in terms of you're only preparing for one session as opposed to as many, but there's not that much investment from the player. Something happens to their character. Hopefully they're going into the idea that it's a one shot, so it should not be a big deal. That attachment hopefully isn't as strong as it might be if they're creating a character that they hope is going to go through a whole campaign. Magnus says in their first game, they were a very edgy rogue who thought they could play as Batman at level 1. And then their GM nipped that right in the bud. I mean, I think we were all there, Magnus. I feel like everyone's been there. Ian says this whiteboard looks like Miro. Yeah, I mean, yes, you're probably right. And Miro is actually what I started with before I got to Ouija. We'll see how this one does. It does have a bunch of AI stuff built in. I haven't used any of it yet. I don't really intend to because it's not free. There's like points, costs, something or other to do it, but they are there. If we needed to whip something up, we could kind of stay in here. I don't know. We're gonna give it a shot, see what it's like. Oh, Magnus, Assassin's Creed. Yeah, well, I can only imagine. I mean, that's kind of after my time in terms of first characters, but I could totally see there being a whole new breed of sort of edgy rogue types who want to dual wield blades and climb up every time they climb a tower, looking for some kind of haystack that they can dive into at the bottom. I'm sure there's a whole generation of players who created Assassin's Creed style rogues. RBG Grandma says that they agree that murder hobos happen with newer players, especially if the GM doesn't make them realize their paper people can die. Yes, I mean, we can have a whole conversation about murder hobos. I think there's kind of a lot to unpack there. But yes, for sure. So anyway, here we have some goals. So one is experience, right? You want to play the game, trying to have a good time. I call it trial, essentially, right? You're giving something a try, whether you're giving players a try, whether you're giving a system a try, whether you're giving your campaign, just your concept a try, right? And then kind of demo purposes. This is more for if you're looking, if you had an adventure that you wanted to publish or do something like that, well, maybe you want to demo it out, or what I did with what I did over the summer where I ran that one shot. You're kind of trying to demonstrate something or other. So for most folks, that's probably not going to be too much of a concern, but for other folks, it might be, right? For my case, since I helped out with Kavlov Sanctuary, one of the things that I did was I ran that one shot in the world of that, or in that campaign or in that adventure, right? And then, but it might be that you have your own thing to do. So many reasons to do a one shot, but it's tricky. There are some tricks. Now, some things that I made me realize the last couple of years, I think I've just been able to sit in on some one shots that are really interesting. I would have thought that I wouldn't have picked the hex crawl as something that I would have picked as a one shot, but I've seen it now a few times where it works, which is fascinating. Now, limited scope, everything is limited, which I guess gets me on to kind of design things. If I was going to pick some things, what I really want to concentrate on. I really want to make sure, because you want to have some aims up front. So you have this goal you've decided to pick, whatever your goal is, right? Whether it's just for fun, or whether it's to try something out, whether it's to demonstrate something. The next thing is you come in, maybe not, I don't know, next, whatever. But the things you want to keep in mind probably for everything else is, I'm calling it design, but it could probably be something else. Focus. You really need to focus. You need to figure out what super important and stick to it, because you only have 3 to, however, I mean, you can pick to a certain extent. If you're at a con, it's probably going to be 3 or 4 hours, or maybe 3 to 5 hours. I'm not sure if they have different time slots, but probably pick between 3 and 5, maybe 4. But remember, you're not even going to be straight playing. It's not like when you go to a con game and you sign up for the 9 to 12 games, that'll be 4 hours. You're not getting 4 hours of gaming. Is everybody there on time? Okay, well, let's wait a few minutes for the last people to get there. Okay, now we're doing whatever character stuff, if we have any. Okay, now we're doing whatever rules stuff, if we have any. Then kind of other questions, right? Then there might be, 5 or 10-minute coffee, bathroom, drink breaks put in there. So even if you think, ooh, I've got 4 hours, it's like, well, it's probably not 4 hours. It's probably 3 to 3.5 hours, depending. Even that, depending on your group, whatever, might be a lot. So you really need to be focused. And so knowing what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, you want to make sure that you want to make sure there we go. You want to make sure that your goals, you're focusing on what you're trying to do. So for example, at Claricon, I played in that great Veiled Society game. But if I was going to, I don't want to say criticize it, but what my one thing would be is that the person was trying to run the module just kind of all the way through. And maybe it can be done. I think he said that he did it for his wife and she was able to run through it. But keeping in mind that, we have all the things going on at the con, all the, we're not getting, when you're playing it with somebody, so this comes kind of back down to this area where I put over here, factors. Okay, time's a factor. How much time do we got? And remember, you're not going to get all that time. So probably subtract some amount of time and say, okay, if I have a 4-hour slot, let's try to see if I can put it in a 3-hour window. And that way I'm relaxed because I got an extra hour. And if you want to take breaks or do some stuff, I can kind of clock it a little bit, right? Table size. So table size is going to be an issue. The bigger your table, so the guy who ran the Veiled Society for, I think his partner, his wife, I think it was his wife, whomever, it was a one-on-one, probably in a very quiet, right? I'm sure they're running at their house or, at home, somewhere like that, where everyone's, you sit down at the table and it's all quiet. It's in your house. Maybe there's a couple distractions. Basically, you're in it, right? And you're the other person and you can kind of get into a groove quickly. You can get into that flow fast. Well, when you're at a con game, nobody knows each other, or maybe some people know each other, but basically you're going to be playing with people who you can't count on knowing each other. You're not even sure how large the table is. The larger your table, the slower things are going to be. When you have one person and you're just playing back and forth, you only have to get one opinion out there, just one course of action. And and you could do things like, this is where callers, and right, that's where it came from. Big tables, lots of voices. You give somebody the role of caller to essentially organize all those voices and just give you one as a GM. So that's something you might be able to try. But basically, the more people you have at your table, the slower it's going to be. And it's not even just going to be in the decision making. It's going to be in all the table talk, cross talk, all that stuff is going to be a factor also. And then, of course, you have the environment. If you're playing at home and it's quiet, it's very easy to stay focused. If you're at a game store and there's lots of things, there's lots of loud noises or just other games going on and people moving about, that can be something. If you're at a con, it can be something similar depending on how the con setup is. You might be playing in an area with 3 or 4 other games going on, and people are going to get distracted by those other games and that kind of thing, right? So you want to kind of keep all that stuff in mind. So getting back to the Veiled Society game, we only made it maybe a third towards, creeping towards halfway through, but maybe a third through the scenario. And that could have, not that we necessarily would have finished it. Who knows? Because you're never going to, I don't think, unless you really take a directorial approach, it's going to be hard to say, oh yeah, we're gonna finish it, because you don't know what's going to happen. Right? You could TPK in the first area, and then you're coming out with new characters, and then you TPK in the second area. Right? Who knows what's going to happen? But in the Veiled Society, essentially, there's a mystery, and the meat of the module, and I haven't read it, so someone can correct me wrong, but it seems like the meat of the adventure is unraveling that mystery for different factions. Now, the module gives you kind of a prologue. It gives you a nice intro. It's like a nice shallow wading into the deep end, so you get to kind of where the formal mystery starts, and then boom, you're doing stuff. Well, at Claricon, we started back at the beginning. If we were just playing it through as kind of the adventure, that'd be totally fine, right? But there are decision points that aren't really meaningful in the one-shot sense that we had. And I think as the GM, as the referee, as the person putting together this one-shot, especially because it's a one-shot, if you don't if you're looking at these decision points and saying either one, if they do something else, adventure ends, right? If you're start the adventure going, you can go left and see the keep on the Borderlands, or you can, and then you say you kind of leave that open, and people go right, it's the end of the story, or there's nothing there. Then don't have that decision point, right? Just put them at the keep. Oh, you don't need a prologue of you're on the way, and where do you go? Oh, you notice there's a road that leads ahead, right? You don't do it. Just keep, bam, start. Or you might even say, in fact, for a one shot, for say keep on the Borderlands, you might actually say you're all the way at the Caves of Chaos, and we're just going to cut all that stuff out, because the part that I've decided, right, I'm making decisions is kind of what I want is the caves. So I don't even want to waste time at the keep and asking questions, right? Because all those decision points at the keep are ideally meant to get the players, get the party to move to the caves. Hey, Low Games, how are you? All the decision points before the caves is really get the party to the caves. I mean, that's what it is, right? You have the keep and you go to the caves, and then you go to the keep, you get some stories, you bounce around, you end up at the caves. And where you think of, well, what's the real meat of the game? It's the caves. So in a one-shot scenario, do I want to do all this stuff and then go to the caves and potentially waste time, right? I've got 3 or 4 hours. Maybe I should just start at the caves. That's kind of that focusing. Figure out where you want to focus it. If this is something of your own creation, for example, that maybe you have this long adventure, maybe you want to publish it, maybe you want to run it for your crew, and you decide, I'm going to kind of one shot of it. Then make sure you focus on the stuff that you really want to do. And I found sometimes when I've played one shots like over Discord, it's been a bit of an issue sometimes, where you end up wasting time on things that aren't important. Like you're in the town. Okay, I'm in town. What do you want to do? Well, I guess I'm gonna go to the inn, go to the tavern, get some rumors, I guess. Okay, you're gonna go to all right, in the tavern, and the bartender runs up to you and says, "Oh, please, something, can you help the lady with her missing dog?" Right? But why spend all that time? Because I know as a player, this one shot, all right, this is what we're meant to do. Go help this lady with her dog. So I'm going to go. So it's not a real decision point in that I'm not going to feel like, ooh, I could not go do the woman's dog and I could do something else. No, I'm going to feel obliged. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not wrong at all. I think if there's a time to railroad your party, often it's in one shot. Get them to the action. If I know as a GM that, oh yeah, and then once they get to rescue, go to the farm to figure out what happened to the dog, that's when all this stuff's going to happen. Just start at the farm. Don't start way back at town and ask us to do things that are just not really important. Like one of the things I thought, like in the one of the problems was, but in that Veiled Society game, like the GM gave us opportunities to buy equipment, but we don't know what we're doing yet, right? So there's kind of a thing of like, well, you could buy some equipment, go to the stores, but finally I started picking stuff out, and like I got caltrops and I got a few things. But it was part of it was like, well, we don't have a context because we're not in a campaign. If we were in a campaign and this came up, we might just have supplies or things, whatever. But in this case, we don't know what we're doing yet. So we don't really have anything to do. We're kind of just waiting around for the next, in a sense, story beat to show up. The next moment where someone's going to come in and do this, or someone's going to feed us the rumor, or someone's going to do this thing. And we're kind of just spinning our wheels until then. And and maybe you feel like, well, I want you to role play or do whatever, but it doesn't tend to be meaningful. I think it ends up just being a bunch of people just kind of looking at each other like, well, I don't know. I think what we ended up doing was just sitting in the tavern. Well, we're just going to sit in the tavern and have another drink, and hopefully something will happen. And of course something does. And it's great, but you could cut that time out. Low Games says, usually in one shots, I always start with an encounter immediately. That can work. I don't think it always has to be. I know a lot of people like that kind of in media restness of start with an encounter. But I've found, I think, recently playing that I have enjoyed having choices first, having some choices, and not necessarily jumping into an encounter. Of course, it's going to be there's a lot of reasons why having an encounter might be fun to start, but I've been enjoying recently having it of a little bit more of a slow roll, or because I guess I just like aspects where I feel like I'm picking more what I get to do, and I guess I can go into we played in Bat in the Attic's games, a couple of his games, and I know he's kickstarting like a hex crawl book, but here's his Rob Conley's Majestic Fantasy. And one thing I thought that he's done really well in both adventures, his one shots, is giving a lot of choice right off the bat. Now you're given a mission, so you're not just off the reservation with kind of wondering what you do, but in terms of how you want to fulfill that mission, you have some choices, and some of those choices obviously are going to lead to combat, and some of them aren't. In fact, in the first one, the one thought I think I liked the least about the first one he ran was he had a forced encounter. The second game he ran, it didn't seem like there was a forced encounter, and I like the second one slightly more than the first. It just felt a little bit like, depending on what you're playing, if you have all these great choices for classes, they're not necessarily all combat focused, and they get thrown into the combat without really being able to do much about it. I don't know. It's not bad, but I kind of liked having some options a little bit. But it's always going to be kind of a your miles may vary sort of thing. We want to be focused. We want to make sure that the stuff we want to cover is the stuff we get to. So if this is your own game and you're like, oh yeah, and I got this awesome idea for a crypt, and this thing's going to be the crypt and all this thing, then you want to make sure the crypt is in there. You want to make sure that that's the thing, that's the cool thing that's in there. Low Game says the encounter is always easy and gives context why they're there. I mean, sure. Like in Rob's games, Bat in the Attic games he ran, we literally would get missions from a lord, right? So we had immediately had context because we were basically given something. I think both games were summoned to a lord's presence, and we were presented with a problem they're having, and we were tasked with solving it. So in that case, we pretty much got marching orders right up front. And I like that too. I like it's very clear, right? That kind of clarity is good. So a couple things I want to note in here before I forget, all right? Clarity and a attainable. So one thing I've noticed, I've heard, I can't say I've encountered this myself, but I've heard folks talk about it. Oh, look at that, detached. I heard some cases where people were, the game that they signed up for ended up being like, you're going to go into a mega dungeon. It's like, okay, but there was no focus, and there was no clarity of purpose, and there was no resolution. It was just, you're going to experience a mega dungeon. I don't think that makes for a great one shot. Great campaign, I have no doubt. Not a great one shot. Now, maybe your selling point is, I want people to experience Castle Greyhawk or Blackmoor, or insert your favorite mega dungeon, Caverns of Thracia, something like that, right? I think you could do that. But I think as players, and I think as the GM, having some purpose, some resolution for your characters. Like, what do you know, like what I did in Kavlov Sanctuary is, it's kind of a big sandbox with a lot of these caves that you can explore. And I picked one, and then I looked inside there and found something, and I kind of created a little plot that take the characters to the caves, something in the caves. So they got to experience some of the sandbox, but it has something to resolve. It has something the characters can say, this is my goal. Okay, how are we going to do this? Great. And it's clear. Like in Rob's games, it was crystal clear what we had to do. There's no confusion. There was nothing weird about it. And there was, it was just very clear, which I think in a short game like this is helpful, because you don't, if you have to spin your wheels trying to figure out, like, well, what are we supposed to do? You're just wasting time. Those aren't fun decisions. What are we supposed to do is not really something you say. It's more something you say when you're frustrated than like having fun. Now, knowing what you're supposed to do and trying to figure out a novel way to execute it, that's fun, right? We got to get this thing. Oh, this is a tough nut to crack. This is a puzzle. Let's dig into this puzzle and figure it out. That's fun. Trying to figure out, well, what the heck are we supposed to do? Not fun. So you want to avoid that. Dave says the mega dungeons by definition are too big for a one shot. I agree, but I've seen it happen, or I've heard of it. People whom I believe have told me that people have run games like that, where it's going to throw you in the mega dungeon for 4 hours. But what are you going to do? You can't make any headway in the mega dungeon in 4 hours. You get hurt. You're going to go back to town and do what? I don't know what kind of experience you're trying to go. Like, I get where you might want to set, like I said, show off the mega dungeon. Maybe that is your goal. You want to demo the mega dungeon, but you still need to come up with some things like clarity of purpose. Well, what am I doing here? Focus. What am I trying? What is the thing I want to show? If I was doing Caverns of Thracia, maybe I would just break with the first level, or have you go all the way down. You find some elevator down to the bottom level where you can deal with the bigger stuff depending on the level. Like, you pick the parts you really want to explore and focus on them, which comes down to this other part, modularity. You want to be modular. You want to be able to plug and play pieces in there. Now, again, in a campaign game, I wouldn't want to do that, because I kind of like the world is the world. If you miss something, you miss it. If it's there, whatever, right? That stuff's all fun. But in a one-shot, trying to focus, you want to be sure that if you're running low on time, but the party's doing pretty well, and it's just because of something at the beginning, whatever, they're not going to make it, but there's a middle section. They're in section 2, then you got another thing that's section 3, and then the final section, and you look at it and say, oh, geez, with the time left, they're going to kind of get stuck somewhere in section 4. They're not going to make it to the final section. Just pop section 4 out and just go, all right, well, they find the stairs going down, and instead of it being to level 4, it's just to the finale, right? If you can build things modularly, and generally with dungeons, especially in places, right, they've got doors, they've got stairs, they've got ways that a door could be leading one place, you can easily turn it into leading to another place. Oh, the stairs are going down to level 4, or they could easily be stairs going down to level 5. It can be very simple in many ways if you kind of contain things so there's not so much overlap that you're going to confuse yourself or somebody else. If the dwarf says, come find me on the the crypt level, and then the crypt level is the one you end up cutting out. So the player's like, well, where the heck was the crypt level? I wanted to find that dwarf again. Well, you probably don't want to do that, or you want to think about it, try to build things in a way that are modular. That way, depending on how your game is running, maybe you need to insert something in. Maybe you're like, oh my gosh, the party's really sweeping through. Okay, but I've got this extra area I can plug in. So then maybe if they're already on level 4, and oh my gosh, it's only been a little bit of time, and I don't want to end it. The thing is with a one shot, like with a campaign kind of game, I always feel like if the party is able to whip through and solve it fast, then you let them solve it. That's good on them. Tell them, well, I thought this thing was going to take you 2 weeks. You did it in a day, in a session, man. That's kudos to you. Tip my hat, whatever, to you. But in a one shot, I think you want to fill the time. You don't want to go super over if you can help it, and you don't want to be super under if you can help it. I mean, sometimes it works out that way, but to the extent that you can try to ride the time, then if you have a little module that you've set aside, like, oh, I got this little area that's just kind of optional, but you know what? If I need the door that they're trying to get open is going to lead to the final place, well, I can always just slot that other in front of it, and then I got another door that then exits out into the main spot at the other end, or whatever it is. It's like, hey, man, do that. So that I've been kind of wandering around, but so we're talking about modularity, having, I think, a clear purpose helps. What is the party trying to do with a mega dungeon? Just as they are, you're just there to exploit it as long as you can. That's not really for a one shot. it's not really meaningful because we're not, a mega dungeon is about long term kind of growth and exploration. We're in a one shot. I'm not saying you can't use a mega dungeon if you want to adapt it, but you need to do some work. I don't think it's sufficient just to say, okay, well, you're going to be able to do Castle Greyhawk for 3 hours. That's not going to be a ton of fun. I think you also want to give the party some kind of attainable resolution. Again, with the mega dungeon, there isn't one. Unless you create one, there's not going to be one. There's no resolution to, oh, you made it to level 3 of Greyhawk. It's like, okay, what is it? UP? I mean, nothing's going to have super resonance, but people like to succeed at these things. People like to get to the end of I think a one shot and say, yeah, we did it, or oh, we came so close. And you can only come so close if you can feel that the finish line is right there. It's just like, well, we were halfway through the level of Greyhawk when we ended. Like, I don't know if we were near anything or not. It's just kind of we just did some work. I think what you want is, oh yeah, we were going there we had to take out the Lizard King, and oh, we got in there, but we were too weak, and his bodyguards whapped us with their tails, and we died, but it was fun. Or, oh, we got the Lizard King, UP, right? So you want to have a clear purpose, but you also want there to be an attainable resolution. And then this resolution you should be keeping in mind as, again, you're focusing, right? You want to make sure that resolution is attainable. Not to say everyone's going to get there, because of course sometimes they're not, and sometimes the not stuff is also fun. And look, if your goal is you're trying to try something out, it's a trial of something you're working on, then all this stuff's going to be work in progress, and so you just can't. But to the extent that you can definitely make sure that the resolution the party is trying to do is something that is clear, they feel like they can actually get to, right? So you can have all that. Now, in terms of, I marked this down as philosophy. We've got tournament or race and narrative. Maybe there's a third one or fourth one, fifth one. You guys can let me know. So narrative is basically, there's some kind of story there, right? Rescue the princess or the prince, or find the lady's dog, or kill the Lizard King, or stop the zombie invasion, whatever it is. There's a narrative there, and you're going to follow it, and hopefully the resolution's at the end of that narrative. And the idea with the narrative is that you're really trying to really get that story told, right? That you're trying to, by the end of the one shot, your goal as a GM is to get them at least to the climactic bit of that narrative. They may not succeed, they may win, they may fail, but you want to try to get them there. It's about telling that story. And I divide that, or I separate it from kind of tournament or race, which is not that it shouldn't have those things, but it's more about the potential progress. So a lot of the old adventures would have kind of tournament scoring. So then you can think about it that sure, the party's still trying to complete it. You want to try to complete it, but there's also this element of scoring your progress, or your progress is kind of important, or at least it's meaningful. If I would the Veiled Society, or I think if he had added scoring to the Veiled Society at the end of it, he goes, hey, you guys scored 8 out of 12, or maybe 6 out of 15 on Veiled Society. You guys check mark this, check mark that, check mark this. Like if he'd come up with some kind of like, here's some things that if you can figure out, I'll score you on. It kind of changes a little bit. They would have added maybe a little. I mean, I would have thought this would be a good experiment. I would have thought that if we'd taken that adventure, that Veiled Society, and we had added scoring to it, and then we'd had some kind of list, not necessarily because you don't want to reveal all the mysteries. We had some things that are like, okay, here are these things you can do. Here much the points are, right? Just like anything, when you add points to it, suddenly I think we would have had some more impetus. Like I think in the beginning of that module, of that adventure, we kind of fiddle-faddled a bit because we weren't really sure what to do, and I wasn't familiar with the adventure, so I wasn't aware of what hook I should be trying to grab or summon from the sky. But we might have moved with some more urgency if it was like, okay, there are these 8 things we got to try to figure out, so let's get moving. Like I think it would have helped inspire us. And if you're playing an adventure and you want to, it could be good for trying something out, certainly, right? If you want to see like, hey, I don't want to do a lot of modular stuff. I want this adventure to go because I'm testing it out or whatever. By adding scoring, I think it can help give the players, as Chaos Juncture, or no, sorry, Eric Jepson says, gives them some drive, something to do, and it gives you a way to see their progress, because you can think about, well, if they do this stuff, then they would have given it 100% completion, and this is 50%, or this is whatever. But you're less concerned with making sure you get to the finish line. You're more about the incremental, the kind of progress you do make. Now, the Chaos Junction says that they're having a one-shot versus Tiamat on Thanksgiving. Wow. If you win, you get stuffed dragon for the thing. That sounds awesome, Chaos Junction. That's your library is cooler than mine. Actually, I don't know. Maybe my library does stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, a guy I used to play in his game, they would run these holiday, just crazy tournament games. I mean, they were long. Oh, they were long. I mean, there's one thing I'd say, it's like, man, it was like you get there at 10 and you were leaving at 10. I mean, it was like a throwback. I mean, doing him and his brother, they would each do one once a year. This wasn't something they ran all the time. And I mean, I guess technically they were one shots, but they were just all day one shots. But a lot of them were really just these big battles where it'd be the whole. I'm sure I have some pictures I could dig out somewhere. The whole table, whole dining room table, just filled with miniatures and things. This is crazy situations. I don't know why that made me think of that with Tiamat, but that'd probably be a lot of fun. So if you're doing a tournament, a race, right, you're more. All right, progress. You're sort of judging your scoring progress. On narrative, you're kind of more about the climax, right? Reaching the resolution, maybe is the best thing. So if you're trying to do, like I said, if you're trying to have an adventure that you want to run, maybe that you're testing out, maybe a trial, maybe doing a tournament, a race would make sense. I would definitely be open and clear because, like I said, I think it can motivate the players. Say we're gonna further you go, or the more stuff you get. When I talked to Daniel about one of his adventures, and I thought, oh, why don't you add scoring to it? Because it just seemed obvious to me that scoring would be a good fit for him. He was coming up with all kinds of ways. I think a lot of it on how much gold and treasure you got out of different places that might score you, right? So you can figure out what metric works best for you. In a mystery, it might be if there's a bunch of different parts of this mystery, maybe your scoring will be based on how much of the mystery or how many different elements of the mystery you figure out. If it's some kind of battle thing, then maybe it's how many things you defeat, or it could be treasure recovered, all kinds of stuff. Now, approach. I split this up into two. Maybe there's probably some kind of combination one. I feel like there's only kind of two. Either you're creating your own thing or you're adapting something that's already done. I mean, I guess creating from scratch, you could be adapting your own work, right? But you're either adapting something or you're creating it. If you're creating it, you have a lot of, I would say creating a one-shot's probably easier, just in the sense of, granted, there's things like, well, you need, inspiration, and you need to write maps, and you need to do all kinds of things. But I think you can really, all these other things we've been talking about, the modularity and getting a focus, and you're figuring out the kind of clarity of purpose and all that stuff. When you're creating your own adventure from scratch, that's going to be a one shot, you can really hone in on that because you keep that stuff in mind from the get go. If you are adapting something, like one time I adapted Isle of Dread as a one shot, it didn't work out. It worked out. I mean, I had issues. My issues weren't all necessarily about it. Multiple things going on there. Though we did actually end up getting to the end. And I had more than a 3-hour, 4-hour window, so there was that. Right, I had more time. It was kind of like a whole evening one shot. So I was able to get over the issues, or we were able to, as a table, overcome some of the issues that we were having, and kind of get to a satisfying conclusion. But I had a larger window of time than just 3 or 4 hours, I think. And I only had, I think, three players. So I wasn't playing with 5 or 6 that you might have at your local gaming store or at a con, so on and so forth. But I think when you're adapting it, sometimes it can be either you need to be torn between different things, or maybe you're looking at an adventure, you're like, oh, this is so cool, but then this is so cool, and this is so cool, and you try to jam everything in there. Or it can be hard sometimes how these adventures are written up to find points that are easy to cut it off. Or, what do you do with this aspect? What do you do with this one? Like again, going back, let's go back to Keep on the Borderlands, right? I said before, hey, start at the caves. And I think ultimately, if I'm just laser focused on getting kind of the most of the stuff I want out of that, I want you to be at the caves. But there's something to be said for starting in the keep. And I could totally see myself saying, catch me on another day, talk to me in an hour. Or I say, I was reading it again, and there are some good things in the keep. I'd like to factions to meet the keep. Oh, I want you to, whatever at the keep. And there's some great encounters that are in the wilderness between the keep and the caves. I think I can manage it, right? Difficult. And some of them might not even, it might not, it just might be hard to cut out areas. But you need to do it. You need to figure out, unless you're running some kind of really small, I'm sure there's some modules out there. I mean, TSR, in the TSR era, there were tournament modules that came out that are probably, I think, against the Giants. I think at least the first one, right? That was a tournament module. Maybe all three of them were. I don't remember. Somebody can recall for me. So they would obviously maybe not need much adaptation at all. But you need to really have that. Well, I guess let me do this. You need to really have that focus. Nope, not what I wanted to do. Can I bend this? Does this bend? It does bend. Ooh, there we go. Look at our. Despite my better judgment, I like this Duke. Okay. All right. There we got some lines there. You really need to be. I almost want to make this. Pop this out a little bit more. You really want to keep your focus. So if you're adapting it, you got to know the material, you got to read the material, figure out what you're going to keep, what you're going to cut, figure out how to make some kind of through plot if there isn't one already. If you're doing in some kind of sandbox like Isle of Dread, I tried to make things much more clear about getting to the volcano, is giving it more of a, this is what you're doing kind of thing. No, actually, sorry, I didn't do a good job. That's something I should have done a better job of, actually, was giving them more of a clear thing. I thought, so my mistake, what I did with the Isle of Dread was I reduced the size. So instead of it being 6 mile or whatever mile hexes it was like really small. So they could move through a lot of hexes more quickly. And I put things out there that I thought were kind of representative of some kind of set encounters that I thought were representative of some of the different areas in the island, knowing they wouldn't hit them all, but they would hit some. And they did. But they didn't really grok the openness so much, and they felt like they were on kind of a monster corridor. It wasn't until I kind of showed them the map that I had been tracking and like all their sort of points. I was like, well, here's where you guys did. And you can see where you hit this and you hit this. And then so this thing was here and I rolled the random encounter and I used this. But for them, it felt like they're just going from encounter to encounter. When the reality was, for me, what I was trying to do is, one, I was kind of skipping forward in time when they were just moving through areas. And, I was trying to focus on these encounters. It just didn't come off. Like I wasn't able to, I didn't communicate well enough what I was hoping, kind of what I was maybe hoping they would do, or kind of what I was thinking they would do. Just didn't do a great job with that. Whereas I think if I was going to run that again, I would probably tie things much more into the volcano, so that it becomes less about just a sort of fiddle faddling on the island. Because I kept the original conceit where I said, oh, okay, yeah, you're shipwrecked on this island and you can kind of do things. And I kind of thought we could have fun regardless of what they did. Maybe they'd be trying to get another ship or something, and that I'd set up some things to help with that, or they're going to go towards the center of the island. I kind of just was like, I'll let them sort of play around with that. But it didn't work. I didn't communicate it very well, and they didn't take to it very well. And I totally take fault myself for that. What I should have done, what I would do again, as I was going to run Isle of Dread, was to be focused, right? What do I want them to do? Yeah, I want them to experience some moving around the island, but I don't want them to fiddle faddle. So instead of having them have a treasure map or whatever, partial map, whatever the things you get in, and then be shipwrecked, what I should have done is say, hey, someone sends you a letter or something where someone's been kidnapped and taken to the volcano, and you know it. so that when you get to the island, you're not shipwrecked on the island, but you have a clear goal. There's some cult or something, whatever, up in that island, whatever. I forget who's up in the crater. They've got the daughter, son, husband, father, whomever, the great muckety muck or one of the great muckety muck's kin, and you got to go get them out. And so, yes, I'm losing some bits of it because I imagine a lot of folks are just going to beeline the fastest way they can get up to the volcano. But still, they're going to run into stuff, and still you can have some fun with the kind of hex crawling things. But they've got that goal. Right? They have a clear purpose, and it's something that's attainable. We're on this island. We can see the volcano. We can get to the volcano. We get to the volcano or the crater, the caldera, whatever it is. Then, bam, we can try to sort this out. And we know what we need to do. And we know we need to do that, and then come back. And that would have given me a better idea of stuff that I'd want to enhance, or because I would probably maybe want to add some maybe cult members to some of the wandering creatures, or maybe some of the folks, if they land near the island or the island, land near some of the villages, depending on where they want to put the boat down, might have some information or other things. Some of the random folks they could run into might have some information, right? I'd want to kind of, you just focus, right? I, as the designer or adapter, are focusing, and I want the party also to focus. Right? I want the activities to be focused. And it's really it's not dissimilar. Creation's kind of going to be the same thing, but you're not going to have to pick. You're going to be, or you're not going to have to try to wean down from whatever they have. You're going to be able to pick from scratch. And the other thing is, not all modules may be the best for adapting as a one-shot. Sometimes square peg, round hole, right? I think of mega dungeons for the most part. Like I said, I think you could take a mega dungeon, take a little portion of it, a little bit of it, and make something focused, where you say, hey, you have to go into the first level of Stone Hell, where there's the thing, and you have to find the thing and bring it back. So you can utilize Stone Hell, you can give them a glimpse at it, but you're not really exploring it as a mega dungeon. You're kind of just using the first level and then into it. But you can, if you want that to be your background, your setting, if you will, then you can. Right? But otherwise than that, you really can't give somebody a mega dungeon experience in 3 or 4 hours. So those, I would say, probably wouldn't be on my short list of ones to convert, unless, like I said, unless you're going to take some aspect, take some little bit. Oh, you need to go to this one part in the Caverns of Thracia and do this one thing. So you just really need to find that, and then I can start to feed in clues about where that is, so you're not just wandering the caverns with no idea. And then, but I'm going to use the caverns as kind of the backdrop. Like, that's doable. But other than that, not necessarily great adaptation material for one shots. And now, if you're creating it, it's kind of wide open. I mean, you just need to figure out what you're going to do using whatever tools you have. I don't have a ton of wisdom in terms of getting your creation there. Hopefully you have an idea. You gotta was it ideate? You have to ideate and iterate. Until you get something that works. Something that works the way you want it to. Does the things that you want to do. Howard Hughes, that is, getting ready to put some more toenails in the jar. Do you have any experience with the convention games one-shots having a darker, more grim tone setting? Would that be detrimental to the one-shot concept? I don't think so. I mean, I think so. Here's what I would say, right? I think that I don't think I've played one with a super grim. Well, I don't know. Daniel's. So I played in Daniel's The Gates of Gax scenario, in which basically, well, the concept, what's the word I'm looking for? The elevator pitch is that there were some gates, right? Some kind of barrier blocking. Think of the wall in Game of Thrones, right? So you have like evil things on one side of the wall, good things the other side of the wall, the bad things that broke it through. And in his game, there was 2 parts, right? The first part, you got to go into the dungeon to get some artifact. Second part, you bring the artifact and bring it out. Second part is chainmail, basically warfare before the keep, and either there you have to stop the forces of good from being overwhelmed by evil. So kind of grim, right? It's not dark on a personal level. It's more abstracted dark, but you're kind of like a light in the darkness. I don't know. Probably depends. So I think you can do it. I do think that people want to kind of win, or at least have a chance at winning, whatever winning looks like. So, however, whatever your kind of grim darkness is, I think people want to have some kind of win condition when you're looking at what is that attainable resolution. You know, thinking about what is the win condition. What is the win condition? So I think having some kind of win, and then it's going to be a lot of. And I will say that, like, I played a Morkborg game, and that was kind of, I mean, it was cartoony, but it was dark, right? End of the world, apocalypse is coming. We got to do stuff. There's a lot of body horror, and it wasn't super dark, but it was darkish, and I think people still had a lot of fun, and we still had the kind of a win condition, which was, well, I mean, we didn't have an original. So when that was, we had to, it was, what was it? I think it was a mystery we were going to solve, or we had to stop, bad things are happening, good people, so stop them. And then once we stopped them, then it became a little bit of, okay, we get kind of a secondary goal kind of makes itself known. So first we think, oh yeah, we're just going to stop these horrible things from doing, horrible actions to good people, or, it's Morkborg, so just maybe slightly less evil people. And then it was, but then we realized what's happening. Okay, there's kind of a secondary win condition, which is basically hijack their means of surviving so we can survive, kind of thing. That actually probably be more, just with the body horror and everything, maybe it would strike me as being more grim dark. But you make sure there's some way that I think people can feel good. I think people want to, they want to have fun, and part of having fun playing games is the potential to win the game, whatever that looks like, right? So have some way to win the game that seems fulfilling in some way, whatever that is. And if it needs to be within the context of a dark thing, like, well, yeah, I think of what the end of True Detective, right? Where it seems, even though they've done all this stuff, it doesn't feel like anything's changed. And then there's, what is it? I guess spoilers for season 1 of True Detective. That was, I don't know how many years ago at this point, but they see a new star or something, and McConaughey's character says, I think the light is winning, whatever. Like, oh, because there's slightly more light than darkness now. The light's winning, kind of thing, right? It's in the scope of the universe. Their victory doesn't seem so much, but there's still given some kind of, some way of justifying everything we went through in that season, all of their sacrifice and everything they've done, at least seem to do something. And I would say try to give them something like that, or at least make that something that they could possibly do. Whether they succeed or not, it's kind of up to them. But I would want to make sure something like that. Does that answer your question, Mr. Hughes? And then let's see, I talked about factors. Let's see. Yeah, scoring, right? What is the win condition? I'm just gonna clock that. And also I wanna clock those. Good. Is there anything else I have to say? I don't know. Anyone else have any? What have you guys got? You guys have any amazing things you've seen or experienced or done in your in one shots? I really liked Rob's one shots as Bat in the Attic. They really kind of I think opened my eyes in a way into some different things you can do. Daniel's are cool too because they're kind of different. He has one that I haven't played that's basically a hex crawl with some little smaller dungeons. And then he's got this one, which is half dungeon, half chainmail. And I think between them, and they've really shown like, oh, look, and other folks at Claricon were doing other things. I didn't get a chance to participate in them. So I can't speak to them because I didn't play them. Some really different things you can think about when you're thinking about, well, what can my one shot be? And I feel like my thinking now has changed in terms of what I would have said maybe a couple of years ago about what I thought a one shot would be, and now where it's like, oh no, I think you can do some of these things, like have a hex crawl. You just got to be mindful, right? Like so say for a hex crawl, when Rob does in his game is he'll lay out a map. And this way, and it makes sense in the context because we're native to this area. We're from here. It's not a out and out wilderness. It's settled essentially. But what it means is that when he says, okay, you're here on the map at point A and your objective is at point C over here, and there's stuff kind of intervening, it feels like you can kind of strategize a little bit. You get to sit there and go like, ooh, do we want to take the road, which may be fastest, but then that thing up there, right? It's, I don't know, whatever the scenario is, maybe it's like, but they said something about there being werebears in the woods that were responsible. And we could go this way and maybe we'd get in the woods. We could maybe see if we can get any signs of werebears or bears before we get to where we need to get to. Or then let's take the road and be direct. And oh, there's a town on the road. Maybe we could check in that town for rumors and go on the way, right? You get all these decision points with the hex map that I love. And you can still play with things like, depending on the situations, do you get lost? Do you wandering creatures? All that stuff. But you're not in a total informational blackout like you might be in a thing where you have no map, you have no idea where you're going. So you have a goal, but the hex map is just another way of opening up. And even if the ultimately the differences in approaches when you're doing that hex map approach don't really matter on that much. You're gonna get there. Granted, stuff can happen, but it's like probably all things considered, maybe there are no werebears in that woods. So whatever's in that woods is maybe going to slow you down a little bit. But it's kind of like you're going to get there at lunch, you're going to get there at dinner, and maybe that extra time you spend will come back and bite you in the end, but probably not, right? But it makes you think as a player like you just have so much more control over it. Oh, great, we can choose. And if we go into the woods and then bandits, ambush us and we end up in a firefight and somebody dies or we end up getting hurt and it slows us down, then we shouldn't have done that. We should have taken the road. Or if we end up on the road and something happens and we're like, I knew we should have taken the woods. But you feel as the player like you have ownership. You feel like you owned that decision. I think that's why, going back to, sorry if I've forgotten who it was at the beginning. Oh, I think it was Low Games who talked about engaging their players with an encounter. And I don't disagree with that. And different folks are engaged by different things. I found is allowing us to kind of have some kind of tactical independence was something that helped get me engaged. And then whatever we did, we had ownership of that decision. We didn't have to go. We didn't have to go to the woods. We could have gone to the road. We didn't have to go to the road. We could have gone to the woods. We could have gone some middle path. We could have gone in some kind of whirligig path. We could have done a whole number of different things, but we chose to do that. So whatever happened off of that was our choice. And I really like that. And so I feel like it made us feel like the place felt like more kind of alive and real. We felt like we had this freedom that I think often in one shots, right? I've talked about it, right? Hey, railroad away. You're in a one shot, railroad away. We want to get to the meat of it. But this, it was kind of managed. It was like a little bit of a managed sandbox because we had our goal. And look, players for the most part, I'm not saying you're not going to run into some players that just try to upset the apple cart just to do it. And I have an itch on my nose, which is why I keep scratching it. But for the most part, players want to, right? Getting back to having a clarity of purpose, having an attainable resolution. Players want to do the things. Like we want to win. We want to succeed. We want to complete whatever it is we're tasked to complete. So putting us in the sandbox has kind of limited risk because yes, the sandbox goes to places, it shows things on the map that don't really have anything to do with what we're doing. And it's kind of a high trust, I guess, process because Rob, as the GM, as the referee, is saying, I trust. I'm going to show you this map, which is going to show you all this area you could go to, and you could just spend the whole game fiddle-faddling over in the southwest corner of the map, even though the stuff is at the northeast where you're tasked with going. I'm trusting you're not going to do that, right? Having the goal, knowing what we're supposed to do, knowing clearly what you're supposed to do means that we can look at that map, and instead of it being confusing, instead of it meaning we get stuck in some kind of what's it called? Like your when you have too many choices, analysis paralysis, AP kind of condition, it just gives us options. And then of course you can be there as the referee. You can say, oh well, if you take the road, it'll only take this long. But if you're trying to be stealthy, the road is heavily traveled, you're going to be noticed. Kind of thing. Okay, but if you take the woods, a little bit dangerous, a little bit dark. It's supposed to be a witch in there you've heard of, but if you're trying to be stealthy and you want to get over whatever, then that will definitely trying to get around the backside of that village without them really detecting you. That's the best way to do it. Or whatever middle way, like you can do. So you can kind of lay things out, still giving the players, I think, kind of some kind of tactical freedom that gives them context for the world. Oh, how far away is this? Oh, okay. They said this thing was over here, and you can look on the map and say, oh, this is here. This is here. Oh, okay. I just felt like it did a lot of stuff, and he did that with both of his scenarios, and I really appreciate it. It makes me want to run one. I don't have a hex crawly adventure at the moment. There's an off chance that I'm going to try to throw something together for PAX. I don't think it's going to happen, but if you're at PAX and you make contact, maybe there'll be something to test out. I'm not sure. Did folks find this helpful? You let me know. What did you think? Is there anything that I missed? Do you have any questions? Anything I can try to clarify if perchance it was unclear? I think someone mentioned on a thread that I read, again, I think it was Facebook, could have been somewhere else. I think Matt Colville talked about 5 things, like thinking about having 5 things in your one shot. And I don't think it's bad advice necessarily. Well, I guess there's a couple things. So here, let me just get this out. I don't think that as a one shot, you necessarily have to. People will talk about, like, you got to have some of this and you got to have some of that. And, you got to make this soup. It's got to be 30% exploration, 30% social, 30% combat, and 10% goofing around, or whatever. I don't think you have to do that. Like, I don't think you have to have a combat to have a combat. And going back to Rob Conley's game, that first game we played at ShireCon, not this past year, but the year before it, the only combat that our group did in his adventure was the one we were forced to do. And I have no doubt that if we had not been forced into that first combat, we literally had no choice, we probably would not have had any combats in the game. And we were all, as players, perfectly satisfied with the adventure. We would have gone through the whole thing with 0 combat. 0. And it was fun. We had a lot of fun doing it. And part of why, going back to the first point again about forcing the encounter, is that's kind of a neat thing to do, is to think about, can we get through this? Can we solve this without killing anybody or even hurting anybody? Can we do it? Can we, like in some of those video games where you could try to complete the whole thing by stealth or complete it all without being seen, or what was it, like Metal Gear Solid? Some of the games was like, oh, can you complete this whole thing without killing anybody? I think those are neat kind of almost side challenges to try, and enabling your party to be like, yeah, you can. You don't have to kill people. You can do this a different way. Now, nothing asks that I'm making a one shot. When can we see it? I am working on a few things. Nothing, and one of them might be a one shot. Probably the first chance you would see it would be some kind of prototype, maybe at PAX Unplugged. If you end up at PAX Unplugged and you find me and I have the wherewithal to do it. Chaos Junction says Fallout New Vegas 100 speech. I haven't played Fallout New Vegas, so you've got me on that one. But I believe you, Chaos Junction. I remember I used to have a coworker who was super huge on those Fallout games, but I fell out of them. Because at the time my computer didn't have the specs to play them. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah. Just basically, yeah. So I might have a one shot at some point. Most likely you'll see it at sorry. I lost my train of thought and I got it back again. You gotta have a little of everything. Magnus, you can totally ask a forums question quick or slowly. And while you're asking, I'll try to finish my thought here. So I don't think you have to have everything. I think it's good to have a variety. So I'm saying you don't have to, right? I think this idea, no, you have to have this much of this much of that. I don't think you have to, but it's good to have potential because different parties and different players like to do different things. Different groups will like to do different things. And in Rob's game, we could have played that adventure, that scenario differently and fought a bunch of stuff. Or the way we did it is we only fought the one thing that we had no choice, and some groups will play in the middle. So the potential's there. All the pieces are there to do social, to do exploration, to do combat, to do whatever. But he's not forcing it. He's basically leaving that menu open for us. And if we wanted to take we tended to take the social approach, and we just solved everything using kind of social mechanisms. And we enjoyed it. And we were able to make that choice. He didn't make that choice for us, but he allowed us the opportunity. The potential was there. The opportunity was there to do social actions, and we happened to take them. Another group, because I asked him afterwards, I asked him, like, well, what did other groups do? And some groups just went kind of combat, heavy. Some folks did were in between us, which was hardly any combat, and 100% combat, and then some folks went right in the middle. Magnus is wondering about how to level up the profile, where to find info. Magnus, I'll hit you. That's a technical question, Magnus, and I'm not even sure I know. So, you know what, Magnus, I will look it up I'll have to maybe dig into the admin side of the forums. Yes, I do have forums.hex.press, where Magnus and others are starting to share some of their own hex maps and things. And I need to figure out on the access thing. I think it's got some kind of levels. I think if you just chit chat more on there, it'll raise your level, but I can probably raise your level. I'm an admin. I should be able to do admin sorts of things. But before I go, just one last thing on going back to this 5 things, right? So I think Matt Colville talked about 5 things, and I haven't watched this video, just someone referenced it. That's kind of, I think the idea was you'd have time for those 5 things. But he's playing, I think, right, talking about modern D&D. 5 things can take you a long time. Okay? 5 things, especially their 5 combats, you're probably not even going to get through 5 combats in your one shot. But if you're playing something like I like, kind of old school, light games, don't constrain yourself to 5 things because Matt Colville said 5 things. Keep in mind his context, which is he's playing 5th edition, maybe he's playing 4th edition. Very heavy, or combat can get very heavy, can be very tactical, very complicated, very long. In another game, like in sort of Daniel using his OD&D or even kind of BX, you can run through a combat, a few rounds, and bam, it's over. 5-10 minutes, boom, done. Depending, right? Someone can win initiative, get some good rolls. All of a sudden, like 8 goblins are laying there dead, and you're like, well, we're done. As opposed to 45 minutes of turn and everyone's action, reaction, all that stuff. So I'm not saying it's bad, his 5 things, and it's definitely good advice, but keep in mind the context. I mean, look, keep in mind all the context, right, of everything. Keep in mind my context about me. I think that's all I've got. Chaos Juncture says, thanks for the advice. You're welcome. Have I played or seen the Lord of the Rings 5e core book at all? I have read some of it, actually. If you go look on the channel, Chaos Juncture, I do have a couple things on some of the things from, I think, either the 5e. So I had the original Adventures in Middle Earth or whatever it's called. And now and I know they changed the name. I have some of that stuff. I have some more stuff that I actually haven't gotten to yet. So yes, I do have some. I think I have some stuff on the channel. If there's anything particular, let me know, because I do need to dig into some of the Free League stuff. And just while I'm thinking about it, I got an email. It's not anything special, but I think they're running they're having a big Black Friday sale. I think it's, I don't think they're opening up early. I think it's on the Friday, but I want to say I saw something like 50% off of stuff. 50%. I know that's very highly, hold on a minute. Let me see. I know that's very specific. 50% of stuff. What is it? Let me see if I can pull it up on my phone here. I just had it. Let's see, where was it? Here we go. So Free League Publishing, Free League, and Free League has been very kind to me. They don't sponsor the channel or anything, but they've been super kind to me, and I really enjoy their stuff. So I hope you'll apologize. And I like I said, I don't think this is. I think this might be kind of a press release sort of thing. Anyhow, Free League, a Black Friday sale, and new. Okay, so there's a new website design, but up to 50% off core games and starter sets, starting on Black Friday, November 24th. So I guess they're doing a redesign and they're giving up to 50% off. And the kind of the core sets, the game books and core sets they have, and starter sets they have listed here: Blade Runner, Alien, The One Ring, Vaesen, Forbidden Lands, Symbaroum, Mutant Year Zero, Twilight 2000, and Tales from the Loop. So lots of good stuff from Free League. Checking out on Friday. I'm going to try to. I know they're having they'll be at PAX U, so hopefully I'll get another conversation with someone over at their booth on over PAX U. Like I said, if you're going to be at PAX U, reach out, let me know. I'd love to meet some folks. If you see me walking around there, unless I'm actively interviewing somebody or whatever, then come and say hi. That will be fun. Also, I'm going to be there all 3 days, so there'll be plenty of time to find me. So find me, and I hope this was useful. None Nothing. I will probably do some. Oh, I guess for None Nothing and others, maybe I'll be able to stream something. Probably it'll be leading up, not this weekend, but next week, maybe for a couple days. I'll do some prep streams, see if I can get together. One of the things about streaming that I find very helpful is that talk about focus. It forces me to focus. So maybe I'll plan to stream a couple days of figuring out a one-shot kind of hex crawly thing were I to do one. So, but that's it. So I hope you guys found this interesting. Let me know what you like more on this. I know it's kind of high level. I didn't get into kind of a lot of nitty gritty. I feel like a lot of that's going to come down to your specific material, what you're trying to do. Maybe we could do something. Maybe what I can do really is if there's interest and, leave comments and upvotes and whatever to let me know that you want more of this, is maybe we could do an adaptation. Maybe I could go back and try to fix my poor adaptation of, or redo my poor adaptation of Isle of Dread, or pick something else. And we could do that. So there's lots of stuff we can do with this. I think that one-shots are really useful tools that don't get used enough. So use them and run more games, everybody, and play in more games if you can. Finger red number one, says Chaos Juncture. I'm sure it's an emoji on YouTube, but on my kind of multi-stream chat, it just comes through. Metal, yellow, first red. Awesome. Thanks for the emojis, folks. I'm going to take off. Should be back tomorrow, but that'll probably be my last stream for the weekend for the Thanksgiving week, right? Because Thursday being Thanksgiving Day and Friday being Black Friday, I will be with family, and hopefully you'll be with family too. Even if it's not, I know Thanksgiving is just an American holiday, but get your family time whenever you can, because you only have one family usually. Anyhow, with all that said, enjoy the rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I'll talk to you later. Bye now.